Leia. Welcome to this episode of Diaries of a Witchy Creative Life. Today, we are going to be doing a love and relationships reading. I uploaded one not too long ago using Ethany's Modern Love Tarot, and that was more of a general sort of thing. Now in this video, we will be addressing why it isn't working. It doesn't have to be a romantic one. It could be a friendship, a family relationship, someone at work. Listen to the points that come up on the cards and see how any of these apply to you. It's also possible, by the way, that the points or questions that come up here will apply to a few different relationships or friendships you've had or been in. This reading in its entirety, by no means, has to address just one relationship. If you find that some questions apply to the relationship you most want to explore, but the other questions don't apply or they apply to a friendship instead, if that catches your attention and you feel compelled to do inner work on that, go for it. As I like to say, as long as you're understanding yourself better, as long as you're growing in self-awareness, that's all that matters. This is not a predictive reading, so you're not going to be hearing, you'll be meeting a new person pretty soon, or you guys are going to get back together. Rather, it's explorative, so it will get you thinking. And please, feel free to use this video as a guide in your journaling, if you're looking for inspiration in that department. Okay, so let's get started. Card number 1 is the Two of Swords. What comes up for me right now as I look at this card is, in what ways were you looking the other way in this relationship? And by that I mean, maybe there were red flags from the very start, or close to the start, but you were in denial of them. And these red flags don't just have to apply to the other person. It could be about you as well. Because sometimes our behavior changes in relationships or depending on who we are around. And it isn't always for the better. So if there was any of that sort of thing going on, in what way might you have found yourself not being logical or objective? To give one example, maybe from the start, you already saw that there were deal breakers there, but you really wanted it to work, or at least you wanted to give it a try. So you might have pretended they didn't exist. It's been said that hindsight is 20/20, so there could have been any number of reasons why you chose not to see the truth. But maybe from where you stand today, you might have a little bit more clarity if you admit to yourself or be honest with yourself about what was always right in front of you. Is it possible that there was a time that you were already getting the feeling or the knowing that it would be better to, if not end the relationship altogether, at least make some pretty important changes, and yet you decided not to? Or in some cases, made the decision not to make a decision at all and just let things continue the way they were. Go ahead and think about how any of that might have impacted what eventually ended up happening, or how the relationship did unfold despite the denial, despite what I'd mentioned about looking the other way. Looking back, do you think it would have made a difference to be honest about all this and discuss it? And if in your opinion, having an honest discussion wouldn't have worked, why do you think you allowed yourself to stay, or you allow the relationship to go on for as long as it did? If that does apply to you and it wasn't one of those that ended pretty quickly. So let's stop there with card number 1 and move on to card number 2. which is the Ace of Cups. In this relationship, was there somebody who had more of a hopeful personality than the other? And that person either ended up keeping that light of theirs under wraps, or the other party was the reason why they eventually did it. Okay, let's state that again in case it wasn't clear. Was there someone in the relationship who was, let's say, more fun-loving, more positive, more exuberant, but then, as time passed, they began to cloak that part of themselves or no longer share it with the world? Whatever the reason may be, whether it's because they didn't want to upstage the other person, or the other person made it clear to them that they didn't want them to act that way or to be that way, that's something to reflect on. Even if the other person didn't tell that happier, positive person to tone it down, what was the reason that that person might have felt like they needed to? I'm also going to rephrase it because it might be more relevant to some of you out there if I state it this way. Let's talk about you and not the other person for a moment. Did you feel in any way, even if you're not this super loud or extroverted sort of personality, did you feel in some way that you had to be quieter around the person you were with, where even if they didn't tell you to do that, you felt like you might be making them uncomfortable by being yourself, that you had to change who you were, that you had to hide your light? And sometimes this isn't even necessarily a very obvious thing. Like I said, you might not be super extroverted, so it might not manifest in such a way where, oh, you used to be a party animal, now you're not. It could show up in such a way where you find yourself holding back. And this brings us to, is it possible that there was codependence in this relationship? Or maybe you're aware that yes, there was, but could there be a greater deal of it than you've admitted to yourself? Sometimes people who pride themselves on being strong and independent find themselves codependent once they're finally in a relationship, or once they get involved with a certain kind of person. Certain personality traits trigger them to be clingier when they're typically not like that. So think about that, and please look up codependency if that is something that you want to have a better understanding of. Now let us look at card number 3. It's the King of Wands. It's interesting to me that we should get the King of Wands after the Ace of Cups, because what's coming to me now with the King of Wands in this moment is about someone having a strong personality, someone who leads, someone who inspires. So my question for you now is, did you find yourself going along with what the other person wanted, even if it wasn't exactly what you found desirable? And for some, this doesn't even mean that they coerced you, but did you feel like you had to do what they wanted in order for the relationship to work or in order to keep them? While for others, the question is, if it was you who was that kind of person, the one with a strong personality who influenced greatly the direction the relationship went in or the activities the two of you did, is it possible that you were exerting a little too much of your energy on the relationship or on the other person to the extent where they couldn't be themselves anymore. And no, if everybody's grown, we all make our own decisions, and they had every opportunity to say they didn't want to do that if you weren't actually forcing them. But sometimes people with really strong personalities aren't aware of it in the moment. How sometimes the person they're with, or even a group of people that they're leading or are a part of, might not know how to say no. Sometimes people with strong personalities, they could get lost in the moment, and you might not even mean it in a harmful or negative way. You might just be so inspired, you might be carried away by your feelings. Like, just to give an example, you might say, let's go on this trip. And you paint this wonderful picture of all the stuff that you're going to be doing, all these adventures you're going to be going on, and the other person gets swept up in that as well. So they say yes. But as some time goes by, they might realize that they didn't really want to do it after all. And maybe you notice that they're not as enthusiastic about it. So that's some food for thought right there. Whether you were the person with a strong personality or the one who got swept up in the energy of the person with a strong personality. Maybe that played a role in the unfolding of the relationship or relationships you'd like to explore. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope you found it helpful and you now have a few points that you can think about that could guide you in having a better understanding of this relationship and yourself as well. I will see you again very soon. Take care. Bye for now. Stay tuned for more Diaries of a Witchy Creative Life.